Get ready for all the craziness of small business. It's exactly that craziness that makes it exciting and totally unbelievable. Small Business Radio is now on the air with your host, Barry Moltz.
Well, thanks for joining this week's radio show. Remember, this is the final word in small business. For those keeping track, this is now incredibly show number 578. This episode is provided by Nextiva, the all-in-one communications platform for your small business. It's also sponsored by LinkedIn, the place to generate leads, drive traffic, and build your brand awareness. For a free $100 credit to launch your campaign, go to www.linkedin.com/SBR. We're also sponsored by Visita, all you need to run your business in one software. Try for free at www.visita.com. That's VCITA.com, and use the code Barry10 for an exclusive discount. Well, I think there's one overlooked component to small business success, and it's something we don't get enough of, and that's sleep. I know I'm the kind of guy that still needs to get 8 hours, and when I don't get it, well, I get a little bit cranky, and quite honestly, I'm not at my best. Here to help is Giles Watkins, who is a coach and mentor with both Aberkin and Vistage. Giles has over 30 years of global business and general management experience in enabling decision makers to solve problems, achieve balance, and deliver superior results and sleep better at night. He's author of a book called Positive Sleep, a holistic approach to solve sleep issues and transform your life. Giles, welcome to the show.
Oh, good afternoon, Barry. Yeah, from London. Good afternoon.
Great to have you with us. So tell me how you actually pronounce Aberkin. It seems like I butchered that one.
No, that you've said it really well.
So why is sleep so often overlooked when it comes to performance of business people and folks in general?
I think for the last, as long as I can remember, until really recently, in the last couple of years, when a conversation seems to have started about it, it's felt like the thing that people think they could cut. And we all know the experience, even probably from childhood, when we had a bit of homework we needed to make sure it was delivered on time. You might stay up late, or get up early to do it. So I think it's one of those things that most of us get into a habit of cutting at some point relatively early in our life. And maybe it works on a one-off basis, and then we start to think that maybe that's a smart thing to do.
Well, do we cut it because we actually can get by for a certain period of time, really with a lot less, or without it?
I think that you're right. I think if you cut it for one night and say you were saying you enjoy 8 hours, suppose you had maybe 6 for a night, so long as you catch up or have a pretty solid 8 hours or more the next night, you should be fine. The problem for most of us comes when we cut it every night and then think we can catch up at the weekend and things like that. So I think you're right. I think cutting it once in a while, most of us feel doesn't do any harm.
So what does your research show about people that don't get enough sleep?
Well, my book is a fusion, if you like, of my own experience and research from my own life, and a lot of reading and talking to others as well. And what it shows is that, much as I've already alluded to, that the first night is fine, but beyond that you start to suffer both physically and mentally. And of all the parts of the brain most affected by lack of sleep, the brain is the one that suffers the worst and where it shows up first, and it's also the part of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that does all the kind of the leadership stuff, the main management of key activities that people running small business, for example, need to master. That's where you get affected quickest. So ironically, people, sort of people listening to this show, probably who are carrying the burden of running their own business and often think that maybe cutting sleep is smart, it's the very area of the brain that they need most where sleep is particularly vital.
Because in today's society, we don't much need rest of our bodies because it's not like we're out in the fields working all day, right? We really need the rest of our mind, and that's what sleep enables you to do. Because I know when I don't get a good night's sleep, like last night, my mind the next day is just jumbled. It seems like when I get a good deep sleep and I have some great dreams, it almost relaxes my mind and kind of washes everything out for the next day.
Yeah, because I often think that the best way to describe it to people is the sort of first 3 or 4 hours of your sleep is the physical recovery, and the next 3 or 4 hours is more like the mental recovery. And a lot of people think they can get by on 4 hours sleep, and they can just sort of lug themselves around on a daily basis physically, and they can actually still function, not optimally, but they can function. Whereas those of us that really try hard to get 7 to 8 hours sleep know the benefits from a mental point of view. And it's certainly a number of things go on in the brain when you're sleeping. And one of them, much as you're alluding to, is that you start to integrate your learnings from the day before. It's almost like your operating system is updated on a nightly basis.
Right, exactly.
Well, and also your memories are filed properly as well to go hand in hand with that. So hopefully, we learn things most of us aspire to be lifelong learners. We learn something every day, and if we sleep well at night, that should then be properly integrated into our knowledge of the world and how we can perform better.
Do different people actually need different amounts of sleep? Because that's what you hear a lot of. Like, I only need 4 hours, or I really need 8 hours, or whatever that is. Or do human beings really need all the same amount? Or does it depend on their age?
There is certainly when you're I'm typically talk about adult sleep. When you are a child, you need a lot. Babies need up to 18 hours a day when they're first born, and then gradually, I've got a 14-year-old son who I know observationally, but I also know from reading, he needs at least somewhere between 9 and maybe 10.5 hours sleep to function at his best. For adults, it's typically 7 to 8 hours, or maybe slightly more, based on all the different research that has been done. It doesn't seem to be that older people necessarily need less sleep. The challenge for people who are retired and maybe become a bit more sedentary is often that they actually don't wear themselves out in the day, and they don't get enough sunlight, and actually generally they start to sleep worse because they're not as tired as they might be. The other thing to note, which is kind of linked to what you're saying, Barry, is that there are definitely larks and owls in this world, and that is a genetic thing. So if you're someone who loves the early morning and maybe wants to get to bed a bit earlier than many other people, that is part of your DNA. It's part of the way you're wired. I'm a lark. I know owls. For owls, that's probably very annoying when the other one has always been up and wants to chat early in the morning, but actually wants to leave the party early.
I mean, I'm neither a lark nor owl. I like to sleep at least till 8 o'clock, and I like to go to bed at 11 o'clock. So I don't know what that makes me. Well, Giles, one of the questions
that makes you one of those
go ahead.
Balanced people.
Exactly. Giles, does this really vary by culture? Is it a cultural thing? Do Asian folks or European folks or American folks or South American folks, does it vary by the kind of culture brought up with, the way you approach sleep?
I think so in terms of time. Certainly, if, living in, I know people who live in Barcelona, for example, where they always go to bed fairly late, and that's the culture and the way they work. I don't think that from a, if you like, there's any other reason for that rather than a cultural habit. I don't think there is in terms of the genetics between people living in different parts of the world.
And what do you do when you have particularly bad nights? So for me, I usually am a pretty good sleeper, but recently I've had some really bad nights, and you always don't want to reach for that Ambien as the solution. No. What should you do?
There's multiple things you can do. If your challenge is getting off to sleep, so you just can't, your brain is whirring and you just can't get to sleep, taking taking baths, for example, an Epsom salt bath or any other sort of natural oil or salt is a fantastic way of relaxing, and that's one great way to get to sleep. Another good way is to read, and read paper, or maybe a Kindle, but something with low light. And make sure that you leave your devices, your electronic devices and smartphones and iPads and so forth out of the bedroom, and don't look at them for the last hour or so before you go to bed. Something else I've used recently, which has really helped me, again, like you, I'm normally a pretty good sleeper now, but I still do have nights when I find it more difficult, is something called a weighted blanket. You may have heard about these. These are blankets that are specifically designed to almost simulate what it was like as a child when you're hugged before you go to bed, or even tucked in the old days when we, certainly in Europe, used to always have sheets and blankets rather than duvets. You got tucked in very, very tight. Well, it kind of replicates the same thing, and they should be somewhere between 7 and 13% of your body weight. So I'm at just over 90 kilos, and I've got a 9-kilo blanket, and that's fantastic. I particularly find if I wake up in the middle of the night, which is kind of the other common thing along with not being able to sleep when you first go to bed, and want to go back to sleep then, I really make sure I get a good second part of the sleep, as it were, when I'm using that.
So what is really the key to calming your mind? Is it the routines before? But what happens if you do the routine and you're there? And like for myself, one of the biggest issues sometimes, and it doesn't really relate to anything, your mind just can't turn off. What should you do then if you're lying there? Do people use counting or meditation or visualize them someplace else? What have you found that works?
What I used, and what was a turning point for me in my sleep challenge, and I describe it in the book, is a form of mindfulness, yes, which is a body scanning technique, which is where you think about the top of your head and you focus on it for 5 seconds, and you thank the top of your head for what it does for you, and you move on then to, say, your forehead, and then you move on to your eyebrows, and you actually go right down your body, spending sort of 5 to 10 seconds approximately on each part, and just focusing, bringing your attention to that and thanking that part for what it does for you. And if you do that, if you do 3 or 4 scans, so up and down and up and down, by the end of the 3rd or 4th scan, you'll either be asleep or you'll be in a much calmer state, as long as you can really keep your attention on where you are. And if you get distracted, you just accept that we're all human, we get distracted, and just bring your attention back to where you were. I found that really worked well for me.
And how does counting sheep work, and why has that become so popular, I guess legendary?
Well, it's kind of a similar principle to what I've just talked about. It's just giving you something else for your mind to focus on. And if it's repetitive and you are tired, then the chances are at some point you'll doze off. And I know I've listened to, going back, 10 or 15 years, I listened to hypnotic tapes to help you sleep. And actually they encouraged you to count backwards very slowly. Which is the same principle as counting sheep, really.
Now, I think one of the biggest things I believe that hurts sleep is that people are looking at their electronic devices. You mentioned this before they go to sleep. I know that my wife and I are one of the rare couples when I'm home. We both go to sleep together, but I'm always turning off my light first. And the last image I look at, Giles, before I go to sleep is her on her smartphone. And the first image I look at when I wake up in the morning is her on her smartphone. And I go, hun, this is affecting your sleep. Why aren't those devices good for you?
Well, I think there's a few things at play there. Firstly is the blue light that's emitted from them, which dampens the melatonin that actually helps you get off to sleep. Now, people like manufacturers of phones, etc., have got smart to that, and so now they provide filters that mean that the emission is not as strong as it is normally. So that's a positive. However, it's still not as good for you as reading paper or a Kindle or something like that. That's the first thing. The second thing is the actual kind of stimulation you're getting from them at that time of night. Of course, the chances are you're looking at it and you attempt to do a bit of work, or a work email just pops up because you haven't not notification off, and it still keeps you in that on work mode, which is not conducive to sleep. So there's a really good body of opinion based on multiple studies that shows that essentially allowing yourself to wind down before you go to bed is the best way. So for an hour before, having a bath or reading or chatting or whatever, kind of wrapping up the day, as it were, is a much better way to pay yourself to sleep than being on your phone or your computer. The same thing goes for the morning. And why does that work in the morning? Well, it's a bit like it's also a bit like the old coffee percolators, which just take time to just get to drip things through. When you wake up, your brain is still processing things from the night before, and there's quite a high chance that you might suddenly think of something in the first hour, especially you're in the shower. Often we get our best ideas in the shower, people say, first thing in the morning. Well, that's no coincidence. That's because your brain is a bit like an old-fashioned car. It takes time to warm up in the morning. So if the first thing you do is reach for the phone, and if you're if you're a currency trader or something like that, the first thing you do is reach for the phone and see what's happening in the markets that have just opened. Loading new information right on top of just having gone to sleep is not a great idea. It's much better to just let the day in, have a cup of tea, take the dog out, or go for a walk, or just generally have some quiet time to start the day before you start doing tasks that need a bit more of the brain.
Well, Giles, I appreciate you being on the show. The title of the book is called Positive Sleep, A Holistic Approach to Resolve Sleep Issues and Transform Your Life. Where can people get in touch with your work if they want more information?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, so that's probably the best way to find me, Giles Watkins.
Giles, thanks so much. This is AM 820 WCPT in Chicago. We'll be right back. Time and place is everything, especially when it comes to marketing. But in today's age of 1 million messages per minute and not enough hours in a day, how do you really catch people's attention? Fortunately, there's a simple way. LinkedIn can help you speak to the right professionals at the right time. With over 62 million decision makers on LinkedIn, you're able to connect with the right business leaders who are relevant to your company. And with LinkedIn ads, you can make sure your messages are getting through to these relevant people. Even small businesses are making the most of LinkedIn ads. They're using LinkedIn to get their voices heard and their messages to resonate with the audience. It's not just about awareness either. LinkedIn ads are driving traffic and engagement, whether that's visits to a landing page, registrations to an event, or downloads of that thought leadership piece. Because with precise targeting, small businesses can speak to the people that matter the most. At the end of the day, LinkedIn ads are helping smaller businesses get big results. Try it for yourself. LinkedIn is offering a free $100 LinkedIn ad credit to launch your first campaign. Simply go to www.linkedin.com/SBR. That's www.linkedin.com/SBR to claim your free $100 ad credit. Terms and conditions apply.
You've already upgraded your cell phone to a smart device, which lets you use the internet to be more productive on the go. But what about your desk phone? Nextiva is a smart business phone system in the cloud. With a simple setup through an internet connection, you can soon have access to your office communications wherever you are. Stay seamlessly connected with clients and stay more mobile than ever before with just one low monthly cost. Give your business more than just a basic desk phone. Visit Nextiva.com or call 800-799-0600 to learn more today. Nextiva. Simplifying your business communications.
Stick around to get your small business unstuck. More of Small Business Radio with Barry Moltz, now on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Well, too many small businesses have no idea what their company is worth until they want to sell it. My next guest says it's way too late. David Fein is an entrepreneur, world traveler, and adventurer. At 16, he was the second youngest person ever to set foot on the South Pole, where he flew an American flag, which he presented to President Carter. At age 19, David started a sailboat charter business, and at 25, sailed Tahiti. In 1986, he co-founded ValueSource, which is a leading provider of business valuation software and data for professional valuators, brokers, owners, and financial advisors. David, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
First of all, great adventures. I've been in every continent except Antarctica, but I would never step foot in the South Pole. What made you want to do that?
Well, it's kind of a crazy story. At 15, I was a sea cadet, and got the opportunity to spend 6 months on a Coast Guard icebreaker, which was super exciting. But I had been reading about all the early polar explorers, Amundsen, Shackleton, Byrd. Shackleton really captured my attention.
Me too, yeah.
Incredible, right? So I decided I wanted to get to the South Pole, but, just getting to Antarctica on a ship was a crazy adventure. I was talking to my dad, and he said, let's figure it out. So we put together the South Pole Project, and it was my first real sales adventure where I sold the Coast Guard, the Sea Cadets, and the Navy that it was worth risking my life to get me to the South Pole. And the idea is to promote the Sea Cadets, which is an incredible organization still around today, and fly an American flag at the South Pole and come back and present it to President Carter. So we pitched the story, everybody loved it, and I got to the South Pole.
And what do you remember most from that experience?
Well, two things. One, it was totally freezing. It was 60 below zero. I had no idea what that kind of cold was like, and I wasn't dressed for it. But seriously, when I stepped onto the ice at the South Pole, what I really remember was just that visceral feeling of realizing that this crazy dream this 15-year-old had could come true. And if you believe in things and keep going for it, you can make absolutely anything in your life happen.
So then how did you transition to want to start your own business?
Well, that's an interesting story. I came back from that adventure, ended up going to school, getting a degree in computer science, ended up sailing to Tahiti, coming back, and I met a guy that was starting a computer store, and a guy walked in with a broken computer, and he needed a programmer, and I happened to be a programmer. We got together and started Value Source in January of 1986. So it wasn't my vision to start a business, but I sort of fell into it, and I really learned a lot about entrepreneurship from the guy I started it with, and over the last, this is our 34th year, over the last 34 years, I learned a lot about entrepreneurship and business. It's
funny because you mentioned computer stores. That's when there were computer stores, right?
Yeah, it was one of the first ones. This guy was like the early Michael Dell selling IBM computers for under $1,000 in San Diego.
So we talk about business valuation. Why aren't more business owners curious, or why don't they find out what their business is worth before they want to sell it?
Well, that's a great question. I think there's a couple of things. I think fundamentally, business valuation answers the wrong question for entrepreneurs and business owners. And the question that it answers is, what would someone be willing to pay for your business today if you don't change a thing? And I think, we're obviously all focused on growing businesses, growing value, but it's a back burner kind of a thing. And, it's also very hard and expensive to get a valuation. It's, $4,000 to $20,000 to get a valuation. And once again, the valuation is answering the wrong question for an entrepreneur. So they usually don't, in a vast majority of the cases, entrepreneurs don't really find out what their business is worth until there's an event that triggers it. Whether they want to sell it, or there's a divorce and they need to figure it out for court, or there's an IRS issue or something like that.
So how do I find out? Because I work in selling, half a dozen businesses a year, and people say, well, what is my business worth? And of course, the first answer always is, well, whatever anybody's going to pay for it, or a certain multiple of cash flow. But actually, can you look at business sale data to figure out what it's really worth?
Well, absolutely. It's been interesting. We've been reselling business sale data for 30 years, and we actually just bought the largest in 2008, we bought the largest database of business sales. Think of it like an MLS. It's like, when you sell a house, your real estate agent goes to the MLS to value houses, and that sort of makes sense. What other similar houses have sold for is about what yours is going to sell for. So yeah, absolutely. The data, it gives what I call a value roadmap. In other words, it shows you what businesses in the industry or that geography sell for, and it's incredibly helpful.
But how do you map your? I think it's a lot easier when you go out and you sell your house because there are comparables. Are there comparables for businesses that perhaps aren't a coffee shop or a hair salon?
Yeah, absolutely. We have 40,000 comparables in hundreds and hundreds of industry classifications. So yes, the data is there. Most people don't know about it. It's mostly used for professional evaluators. If someone owns a stock and they want to figure out what it's worth, you go to Yahoo, you just Google it, and all that data is public. It's all over the place. But for privately held businesses, that data is not readily available, and most of it is designed for professionals, business brokers or professional evaluators. So it's really not in the hands of business owners. So yeah, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing for a business owner to figure out.
So how do you come by that kind of data if these transactions are private?
Well, we collect them from business brokers across the country. There's a number of databases in the U.S. There's only a handful. There's like 3 databases in the U.S. that do that. And we, for smaller deals, we work with a network of business brokers, people like you that sell them. And let's say you want the data, and we say, give us some of your comparable transactions, and we'll give you the data for free. And that model has been working for decades.
And David, so as a small business owner, what would I do with this data? Why is it important to have it sooner than perhaps I want to sell my company?
Well, I think it's interesting. Like I said before, the question that business valuation answers is the wrong question. So, getting that, throwing a dart and figuring out where your business value is. And I do think it's important. I think it's important that business owners know what their business is worth. Many times it's their largest asset. I mean, what other asset do they have where they have absolutely no idea what the business is worth?
Exactly. Amazing.
Right? Yeah, it's amazing. So what do they do with it? I think, over the years, we've realized a couple things. One, since business owners don't know what their business is worth, and we really feel like it's important, but we also realize it's not an urgent thing. You probably didn't wake up this morning saying, I need to know what the value of your business is. Your business has a value, but it's not a burning concern. You're worried about revenue. You're worried about cash flow. You're worried about putting out all the fires. I think you call it the hamster wheel, finding some way to keep the hamster wheel running a little slower.
Keep going, right.
Right, yeah. But I think, what we found is there's another hidden piece of valuation if you do it in a different way, and we think it as a much better way. When you think about that range of what businesses sell for, and, I looked in Illinois, yesterday, and, the range of what businesses sell for is much bigger than people realize. In other words, most business owners think that the value of their business is very tightly tied to how much revenue they're bringing in, how much they're earning, how much cash flow there is. But the truth is the range is huge, and it's related to much more than that. So, for example, in Illinois, if you look at the bottom end, businesses are selling for about, 1 times earnings. So, if a business is earning $100,000 a year, they'll sell for $100,000. But on the upper end of that spectrum, they're selling for over 5 times that. So what is that gigantic range? And most business owners don't understand that. In other words, businesses with the same revenue and the same earnings are selling for wildly different things. And to me, that's an exciting thing because what it means is there's a difference in operations. There's a difference in the business that is invisible to most business owners. So what business owners can do is they can use that information to help them understand how their business is performing. In other words, if you've got a business, let's say you've got a coffee shop or a manufacturing company, and your business value is worth half of what your competitors is with the exact same revenue and cash flow, it means they're doing things that you're not doing, right? So that's the real goal. And I think the most powerful thing with business valuation and the most pertinent and relevant thing is using it as a strategic lens to understand how your business is performing and what things are broken in your business, and those broken things are making your hamster wheel run much faster.
So David, is one of the keys, though, to find a strategic buyer versus a financial buyer? Because a financial buyer buys for, multiple cash flow, but a strategic buyer that's what they can make your company into when they combine it with their other holdings.
Well, absolutely, but those are not all, when you look at those ranges, especially in these smaller businesses under a couple of $1 million, many of those are not strategic buys. And clearly strategic buys can raise the multiples to things way outside of this. I mean, you'll see strategic transactions that have multiples that are way outside those ranges. So although strategic buyers are important, the data is that's not really what the data is reflecting. The data is reflecting businesses that are much better than other businesses. When you look at things like, recurring revenue, growth, sales and marketing, is there a defined process, innovation, both internally and externally? I mean, those kind of things make a business more valuable. And the thing that I think is interesting is when someone buys a business, they put a lot of energy into it. They're writing a big check. There's a lot of, diligence, a lot of thought behind it. So I think when you get a sale transaction, there's a lot of importance and value in that value itself. So they're looking at that business and saying, I think the business is worth this. If you lined up 20 businesses and you looked at them all, some would be better than others. What is that? And I think the lesson for business owners is they can dig into that from this valuation perspective of saying, how does my business value compare to other businesses that have already sold? You go, wow, there's things that I could be doing that are much different that would make my business not only much more valuable, but much more stronger. But I think, to me, the most important thing is it slows down that hamster wheel.
So is this what the business performance score that you developed is? It's a way to figure out how to make your company more valuable?
Well, yes, but to me, it's more than just that. Like I said, we've been working with, sale data for a long time. We've owned the IBA data for, 12 years now. And what that does is it gives you a very quick and easy high-level like dashboard saying, how is your business performing? And once again, as entrepreneurs, when we think about performance, we're typically looking at, what are our sales this week, this month, this year, and what is our cash flow? And that's, we tend to be very focused on the economic, value of what's coming through the door. But the truth is there's a lot of other things going on. Businesses are complicated. Core Value Software, who we partner with, talks about 18 value drivers. So the performance score gives you a way to look at your performance. Certainly revenue and cash flow are important, but that's one of the 18.
And so what other things should I be looking at in order to improve the value of my business?
Well, once again, it's interesting. Entrepreneurs understand half of the valuation equation. The equation for valuation is value equals cash flow. What's the cash flow going to be in some future period of time, divided by the risk of that cash flow coming in, right? That's with all the complexity of valuation, it relates to that very simple thing. We all get cash flow. That is super simple, right? It's like what's coming in today. But what we don't understand is risk. And the risk part is the thing that I think business owners miss and is confusing. And once again, I think to raise the value of your business, clearly raising revenue and cash flow are going to raise the value of your business. But looking at the data, it's clear that the things that make a business a better business are the things that not only drive revenue, but, it's not that hard to think about. If someone's walking into a business and looking at it and it's systematized and there's a sales and marketing process that's well-defined and documented and the business owner does not have to be, there making it happen. If recurring revenue is a strength of the business, in other words, do they have contracts where the revenue is recurring all the time? Do they have a process for innovation, both internally for processes as well as, customer service and their products itself? What does the senior management look like, or any management? Is there a management process, or is it, sort of ad hoc? What are their margins? Do they have margins? Are the margins getting better? Are they getting worse? Are they better than the industry? There's a dozen things a business owner can look at, and I think the important thing is to understand how you're performing compared to other businesses, because we tend not to look at that. So if you realize, I'll give you an example. There was a plumbing company in Colorado Springs. And the guy actually was more of a business guy than a plumber. He'd been doing it for a long time. He had a CPA. He even had a coach, and he was doing really well. We went in there and looked at this whole performance score thing. And, the PE ratio of his company was about 1.5, which was on the lower end of what plumbing companies sell for. They go up to about 4.5. So when he looked at that, it was really obvious that besides cash flow and revenue, there's things that were happening in that plumbing company that were causing his PE ratio to be really low. So, he started to look at those things and go, okay, what are the things that are driving my PE ratio? So the exciting thing is, if you can double your PE ratio without increasing revenue, you've just doubled the value of your business.
Absolutely. The last question I wanted to ask you is a point I think you brought up that I believe a lot of small business owners, the same mistake they make, is that their business, when they go to sell it, is still all about them. They're the central cog in the wheel, and that does decrease the value of the business, right? Because without that person, the value goes down. And so you really need to have a business that isn't about you.
Absolutely. That is probably one of the biggest issues with small businesses is that, we're all control freaks, right? So we want to be involved with everything, and we want everything to be the best that it can be, and, we don't want to delegate and all those things. So, yeah, that is absolutely gigantic, and that's an emotional thing. That's a very hard thing, and it's been a hard thing for me. I don't know if in your sort of business, journey that's been
absolutely.
A hard thing too. Yeah, but for me, that was a really hard, and it still is. I'm still learning to sort of let go, trust people, let processes develop, sort of on their own outside of my control. But I'd say that's probably, in small businesses, that is probably one of the number one things that kills value.
Absolutely. Well, David, I appreciate you being on the show. Where can people get a free business valuation performance score report for everyone who's listening?
They can email me at dfein@valuesource.com or call me. Any way they want to contact me, just let me know they were a listener on the show, and I'd be happy to set them up with a free valuation and performance score
David,
report.
Thanks so much. This is AM 820 WCPT in Chicago. We'll be right back. Tune in regularly to my show, then you know that I talk to many different businesses across the country. different types of people, different backgrounds, all kinds of industries. But there's one thing that unites all of us, searching that thing known as work-life balance. I get pretty bummed out when a listener tells me that they haven't been home for dinner in a whole month. That's why I'm so excited to introduce you to vCita. vCita does a lot for one little application. It can help you achieve that lifestyle. vCita is that personal assistant on steroids you never had. It syncs your client information, appointments, and payments. vCita sends automated appointments and payment reminders, making sure your clients keep appointments and get paid on time. vCita understands today's consumer, making it easy for them to book an appointment and pay from literally anywhere. A website, Facebook, emails, even your Google My Business profile. It's also compatible with Google, Gmail, iCal, social media, and Square Payments. So get your free 14-day trial during which you can explore every single feature. Go to vcita.com. That's vcita.com. No credit card required, no strings attached, no brainer. And when you're ready to buy, use promo code Barry10 to get 10% off. Whenever I talk to a small business owner, I insist on one function they should always outsource, and that's payroll. You see, payroll is complicated, and both the employee and the government insist that you get it right. You see, when you do payroll, not only do you have to deduct money from the employee's paychecks to remit to the government, but as an employer, you need to add to it. Plus, you need to send this money to various government agencies on a regular basis, and if you don't do it, they will hold you personally liable for it. So this is one thing you gotta stop worrying about. That's why I recommend the new Square Payroll app. With this app, you can do everything from setting up an account to paying your team. It's fully integrated with Square payments and time cards for W-2 employees and contractors. Square takes care of your tax withholdings, payments, and filings at no extra cost. There is flexible and transparent pricing that scales with your business. So go ahead, search Square Payroll in the Apple iTunes or Google Play app stores to download this app, or visit www.square.com/go/SBR to learn more.
With Barry's 25 years in small business, he has finally discovered the magic formula to make more profit at any company. Business gurus make it seem so complicated, but it is really simple. The formula is P times P equals P, where people multiplied by process means more profit. Learn how you can take a quantum leap in just 180 days to grow the profit in your business. Contact Barry at Maltz.com.
Stick around to get your small business unstuck. More of Small Business Radio with Barry Maltz, now on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Well, when you start a business, one of the first critical questions is how are you going to leverage technology? Are you going to just keep adding apps as you need them, or you can actually have a real strategy? Here to help is Erik Day, who's the Vice President General Manager, North America Small Business at Dell. Erik's passion for technology drives the initiatives that support the company's goals around helping small business and entrepreneurs scale and prosper. Erik, welcome to the show.
Barry, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
You know, it seems to me that technology these days really is the sustainable competitive advantage for small business, because we can do things that the big guys used to only be able to do.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Barry, we're seeing in the market that new startups who are really wanting to disrupt the market are using technology to do a lot more with less people, using technology to kind of drive their business forward. And we're also seeing small businesses that are more kind of leaning in on their future current customer set to continue to reinvent so that they can continue to stay relevant in their markets as well. So we're seeing technology both in the startup community and the small business community being essential to continue to kind of ride this wave of economic growth we've been seeing.
So, Erik, tell us about the different decisions that really have to be made at different phases, that if you're a startup or if you're an established small business.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very, very different. So if you talk about small businesses that, are pretty consistent in the way that they want to run their business, it's all about ensuring that they have some of the latest technology out there to keep them secure, to keep them running very productive, right? Productivity and security are essential for kind of these consistent small businesses that continue to ultimately power their way of life because they wanted to be their own boss and they're running their customer set. They're doing a good job, but they've got to stay current on ensuring that they've got the latest security so they can stay away from security threats. And then they have good productivity so that they can be efficient and fast to give their customers the best experience. In the startup world, where you have owners and founders that are really trying to disrupt the market, they're really looking at much more sophisticated infrastructure, whether that is all cloud-based, whether that's all kind of on-premises IT infrastructure, or what we're seeing, and the reason that I think that Dell Technologies advantage is such an important cause is this idea of this multi-cloud environment, which is where we're really seeing startups really kind of innovate around the technology they want to do to kind of bring their idea to the forefront of their market.
It's interesting to me because I think that especially for established small business owners, there's a lot of fear about what technology they should really bring into their business. And I always keep saying, don't worry about that you're going to automate everything. Think of this technology really as jetpacks. Don't think of self-driving cars. Think more of bionic limbs that are really going to supercharge the processes that are in your company.
You're absolutely right. I think that unfortunately, with the evolution of technology, which is kind of a double-edged sword, you can the technology can be disruptive almost to that small business's way of life, and that's not what we want it to do. We want to be able to have a wide variety of technology to make small businesses who are really simply wanting to kind of keep the boat floating and continuing to drive their customers with kind of that simple solution, those things that will continue to make them fast, nimble, and accessible as quickly as possible to their customers, which we ultimately can do. And we can, as technology providers, have those more, I would say, simpler conversations around technology to not intimidate or kind of rock that boat, if you would.
And I think the good news these days, Erik, is that everything is scalable. You really can consume as much as you can eat. I remember when I was running businesses in the 90s, you had to, once you got bigger, you had to throw out the old and bring in this other huge system. And there was a lot of disruptive. Now you can really bring in as much as you need, especially with everything in the cloud.
You're absolutely right. And the other thing about the 90s is and what we're seeing in the market is that you would have to bring on, tens of hundreds of people to manage those big, huge systems.
Absolutely.
And we're allowed to make small businesses more nimble and more kind of OpEx neutral, if you would, by using technology to kind of gain some of those efficiencies that really aren't that hard. It's not any different than, upgrading parts of your home that need to be upgraded because, the technology of plumbing or the technology of windows or the technology of something else has been done. You don't really need to replace everything, but there are certain things that you can do to make your house more energy efficient that ultimately bring down the overall, spend of your electric bill or whatever it might be. Technology plays that same exact role within a small business.
We're talking with Erik Day, who's the Vice President and General Manager of North America's Small Business at Dell. Erik, where should the small business owner start to be able to leverage their technology so they can compete better with the market?
That's such a great question, Barry. And it sounds like a little bit of a cliche, but we have kind of a mantra in Dell Small Business that no question is a dumb question. When I go to a lot of entrepreneur conferences or I talk to a lot of small businesses, they're still very, very afraid of technology. Now, obviously, as you get into the fintech companies and the health tech companies, it's a bit of a different conversation. But your true new startups, your true new small businesses, we don't want them to be afraid of technologies, and we want them to use their resources to be able to help them kind of create these mini IT business plans, if you would. And whether that's the small business calling us directly at a company like Dell Technologies, where we have these amazing small business advisors that can actually advise them on these questions and these fears they might have. But there's also great IT consultant networks out there. There are great master service provider networks out there that really are there to ask these questions so that we can ultimately start these businesses on a plan to get them where they're going. One great example I love is I use this example of a dentist office right? A dental, office manager will call us. They'll talk about how they're about to expand to a bigger office with multiple dentists, and that's going to happen in the next year. What we'll usually do, we'll actually start with a bit of an infrastructure package for them, making sure that they have the right network, whether that's server, whether that's storage, whether that's some type of public cloud option as well. And we'll get them that kind of storage infrastructure for them so that even with one dentist, you have a way to kind of network the dental office and all of the equipment in there with the front desk, et cetera. But then as you add dentists or as you add hygienists, you can just add the client systems to it because the infrastructure is already there. In the old days, we used to do the opposite. We used to add all the people and then try to build the infrastructure afterwards, which will ultimately can kind of create more confusion. So by just having these conversations about what your plans are about growth, what your plans around of what you want to do, what your plans are around how you want to potentially use the technology out there, any of those questions, there are professionals out there that want to help you build that right plan to make it efficient and make it cost benefit to your company, because we know capital is such a big concern for our small business community.
And I want to really repeat what you said about having a plan. I think too many small businesses invest in any kind of technology because they say, oh, here's a cool app. Let me use that in my organization. Here's another cool app. Here's another cool app. And pretty soon you got a mess, or this person decides to use this app, or this department decides to use this application, and then nothing works together. And it really can hurt your company more than it can help it.
That's right. And while I completely encourage all of the app developers and all of the solution providers out there that are trying to make small businesses more productive, you have to be able to really make sure that you're putting together the right solution for your business based on what your business model is. And in some cases, that means building something a little bit more proprietary for your company that makes it work easiest for you. And that's another way to go about building some of these business plans, is that you can ultimately have a combination of all of these and an infrastructure that makes you able to be seamlessly working through these different functions to make you more productive, right? And you're absolutely right. I think when you try to do it yourself and you're sitting there going, okay, 1 app, 2 apps, 3 apps, 4 apps, you're going back, you can almost make yourself less productive.
Absolutely.
And there's technology out there. And there's technology out there that in simple infrastructure and simple interfaces that we can build at technology companies to help those small businesses more easily access that data in a more consolidated way to make them super, super productive.
Erik, what are you most excited about the new things that are coming out of Dell this year?
We just got through our major sales conference, and I said this a little bit before. In the small business community, especially, what I'm mostly excited about is having a conversation with small businesses around this kind of evolution of in the cloud, completely in the public cloud versus on-prem. And what should I be doing in my office? What should I outsource? What should I have in the public cloud? And I think the greatest thing I'm excited for at Dell Technologies is we have the story around we can build really simple multi-cloud environments where small businesses can manage their costs, they can manage their security, and they can manage their productivity, which are the 3 biggest needs that a small business has. And by building these technology infrastructures, understanding that there is efficiency to have some things in the public cloud, but there's also efficiencies to have things on premises, we can help build those solutions using Dell technology, using VMware, using some of these other software programs to really make this simple technology solutions to make our small business community super, super productive. And I think that's music to small businesses and startups' ears, because more productivity means more time with customers, more ability to go find capital, more ways to expand their businesses quicker. And I would probably say that's probably what I'm most excited about on the technology front.
Erik, there's one more thing I want to talk to you about. Excuse me. Because one of the things that you work with is Dell's Women's Entrepreneur Network and also Pride at Dell Technology. Why is it so important for Dell to be involved in these kinds of inclusive activities?
The facts are the facts, right? The fact is women are creating businesses twice as fast as men. More than 11.6 million firms are owned by women out there, 9 million people generating $1.7 trillion of sales just a couple of years ago, and that's just going up and to the right. Women are doing amazing things, especially around things like sustainability and clean energy and just making the world a better place. And if you look at the key messages that are out in the market right now, that is really where the dollars are going. It's going into sustainability, it's going into technology, and these women are trying to start combining these two amazing initiatives into these companies, and Dell wants to be in the middle of that. So we've built the Dell Women's Entrepreneur Network to build an army of these women founders who are really changing the world, and they're going to need really good technology business plans in order to be able to grow and thrive these ideas that they have. And so we're really excited about the programming we're putting in place, giving them the right training, giving them the right resources, giving them a community where they can speak to one another and share best practices, all in while ensuring that they have the very best technology to make them successful. It's going to be a fantastic year of women founders, and Dell is going to do everything we possibly can to be at the forefront of pushing that agenda.
Well, I appreciate you being on the show. I've been a Dell customer, I think, ever since Michael Dell was selling stuff out of his dorm room. So where can people put together their own plan with Dell?
I mean, absolutely. I could only tell you that we have amazing advisors that are always on hand to help all of our small business customers. And like I said before, there is no dumb question when it comes to technology. We want to be there for the whole part of it, no matter where you are in your growth stage, whether you're just coming up with your idea or you're an established small business. We believe that we can actually help you from a battery to compute to the edge to the cloud and everywhere into the data center. We have what it takes to ensure that you have all of your questions answered, and we really advise you the right way on technology so that you can be as effective as you can in growing your business.
Erik, thanks for joining, and thanks for sharing your insight.
It was my pleasure, Barry. Thanks so much for having me. It was a joy.
You're welcome. And thanks, everyone, for joining this week's radio show. I want to thank our sponsors, Nextiva, the all-in-one communications platform for your small business. I also want to thank LinkedIn, the place to generate leads, drive traffic, and build your brand awareness. For a free $100 credit to launch your campaign, go to www.linkedin.com/SBR. I also want to thank Visita. All you need to do to run your business in one software, go there for free, www.vcita.com, and use Barry10 for an exclusive discount. Thanks to our incredible staff, Sarah Schafrin, Zoe, Courtney Gilchrist. If you're serious about being more successful this year, you got to give me a call, 773-837-8250, or email me at barry@moltz.com. Remember, love everyone, trust a few, and paddle your own canoe. Have a profitable and passionate week.
You can find Barry Moltz on the web at barrymoltz.com, or more episodes of Small Business Radio at smallbizradioshow.com.